Hey guys, welcome back to the lineup.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we welcome on University of Maryland golfer Will Koras. He's a standout in the classroom, on the golf course, and really in everything he does. He served on the executive board for SAC for mental health, and he's helped create a platform at Maryland for raising awareness.
Yeah, and here's Will. Hey Will, how you doing?
Pretty good, guys. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So, how's everything going? I know we've been pretty fortunate that golf courses opened up here in Maryland, but how's everything been going with the quarantine?
It's been pretty good. I just got done with school earlier this week, and I've been really lucky with the golf courses being open. I've been doing that every single day for the last 2 weeks, so it's been really nice to be able to get outside and do something.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we can jump right into it here. So I know you played a bunch of sports growing up and ended up at Maryland playing golf. So do you want to explain to us a little bit about your athletic career from high school into college and where you're at now?
Yeah, so I grew up playing 1,000 sports. I played football, basketball, lacrosse, and golf. And when I got to high school, I just played football, basketball, and golf. And then decided for my senior year I was going to play lacrosse too because a lot of my really good friends were on the lacrosse team. My brother was on the lacrosse team. So I came back, I did that for the spring, and now I'm playing golf at the University of Maryland. I'm a sophomore there. So just focusing on one sport now.
That's great. Are you going to be a junior next year? So you just finished your sophomore year?
Junior next year.
Yeah. So before we get started, do you want to talk a little bit about your mental health story up until this point, kind of just going off of what you learned at events from your school, but also your personal live experience?
Yeah, so kind of growing up, high school, never really had anything wrong with mental health. Never really affected me. But once I got to college my freshman year, it really hit me hard. First freshman year, kind of just adjusting to college, playing a sport, not necessarily being the best person on your team, going from in high school where I was always one of the best players, the best kid on my golf team, the best kid on my football team, to not being close to one of the best kids on my freshman or my golf team my freshman year. So that was kind of really hard, just adjusting to college, the heavy schoolwork, not sleeping some nights, just being really, really busy, and then just had some other things go on during the freshman year that just made it really, really hard for me. And I wasn't myself. I wasn't really, really happy. I didn't really know what was going on. There was one night in November. It was a Friday night, and I just lost it. I was crying in my dorm. I just didn't know what happened to me in the first 2 or 3 months I was at college. I was just lost. So I literally went on YouTube. I searched student athlete mental health because this just wasn't something I knew a lot about then. And the first video that popped up was Victoria Garrick's TED Talk. So I watched that and I was like, wow, like a lot of this stuff that she's talking about, I'm experiencing a lot of the same things. So that was the first time I was like, oh, wow, like I'm actually like depressed right now. Like, and it's perfectly okay, but I need to do something about it. So I just only let my mom know about that. And then over winter break, things started to get better. And then when I went back to school the second semester, my freshman year, it kind of just hit me again. And I was like, it got to the point where like I knew I needed to get help from people. And there was one day I was sitting in a class and a lacrosse player was actually just talking to me about how his coach encourages him to go work with sports psychologists all the time. So I was like, okay, if a lacrosse player, this coach is encouraging him to go see a sports psychologist, there's no reason why I can't do that. So I went and started seeing a sports psychologist at Maryland once a week and started kind of just getting a lot of things figured out and understanding what was going on, why it was happening. And then I also used a lot of stuff in my mental health story and working with a sports psychologist to actually improve my golf game. So that was awesome. So it was really the first year of freshman year, I learned a lot about myself. It was really, really hard. And it's kind of actually given me a platform to do a lot of stuff at Maryland during my sophomore year, which was really cool.
Yeah, so I was going to actually ask you about how that's kind of affected your golf game. I know golf is a very mental sport, obviously, as you know. And do you ever do stuff out on the course? Like you said, you've worked with sports psychologists, but what are some ways that you kind of help manage that while you're out on the course or help manage like anxiety or stress in stressful situations while you're out there?
Yeah, there's so much. Kind of before I hit on that, like during my freshman year, I couldn't play golf. Like I just lost it. There was so much going on. So struggling with that, I had to like almost relearn how to like not like relearn how to play golf, but like I had to figure out ways to cope with a lot of things and really work on the mental side. So one thing that got really important to me was just breathing correctly. So I do a lot of meditation and then I'm focusing on my breathing in between shots. Going into shots has become a really integral part of my pre-shot routine. Another thing I've worked really, really hard on is my self-talk. There's a book I read by Trevor Moawad called It Takes What It Takes. And he pretty much just says, stop saying stupid things out loud. And with my golf game, there's one thing I struggled with a lot was always my driver. That was always like the pet peeve. Like I just couldn't hit it straight. It was bad. And I talked about it so bad around people. And then I started just working my self-talk. Like I'm a great driver of the golf ball. I can do this. Being really conscious of what I'm saying to myself and how I'm saying to that. And the other thing I really focused on was just my body language, making sure I'm walking with my head up, shoulders back, chest up, being really, really cognizant of that, not having my head down in between shots. And I think the last thing that was really big for me is I became very, very process oriented. The results, yes, they matter, but my focus is on the process. What can I control right now in my golf game? I can control my pre-shot routine. I can control if I commit to the shot. I can control how I react to the bad shot. But I don't have control over if I hit a good shot or a bad shot. So I'm not going to let that ruin an entire round. So to do that, I actually, before every round, I set 5 goals. And some they're like as simple as commit to a shot, have a great pre-shot routine, have great mental chatter. So I just focus on that because it's something I can control. So a lot of the mental health stuff I've dealt with has led me into this different side of kind of sports psychology and sports performance that I never really got into in a lot of the other sports. And it's made my golf game so much better. There was one shot that stands out to me. We're playing the Big Ten match play this year against Penn State in the semifinals. I'm all square on the last hole. There's water all down the left, out of bounds all down the right. I would not have been able to do that shot in that type of moment 2 years ago. But I was able to just to go to my breathing and really focus on what I can control, and then went up, hit a great shot. And that was all from the mental preparation, all from that. It had nothing to do with the physical side. So it's been really cool just to learn more about myself and see how much that can really enhance your performance.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's a lot that we could talk about from what you just said. Everything that you said are really valid points. And I play baseball. I'm not a golfer, but a lot is the same with baseball as it is with golf, with the mental side of sports. And I really appreciate you talking about, you just went on YouTube and you found a video and you related to it and you realized, okay, like I'm okay. Like I just need to get the help I need. And I can really relate to that because when I was going through my thing, the one thing that I noticed was, oh, wow, like this is exactly what I'm going through, just on like a YouTube video. And whether those people know it or not, they're really helping. And I'm very close to Victoria, and I know that she would really appreciate hearing that. And it like makes her day, makes everyone's day. But that's such a main point. Like there are resources out there for you if you need help or if you don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? So it's such a asset to have that type of, thing at your fingertips that you could go to. And off of that point, I also want to talk about, positive self-talk. That's a big thing in golf. It's a big thing in baseball. So you said you read a book, and so did you work with the book and the sports psychologist on this, or did you bring this to the psychologist? Was it a mix of things to get this going?
The way a lot of the sports psychologist stuff did with my sports psychology, didn't really know golf. You just knew a lot of other sports. So we almost had a trial and error period for like a couple months of just figuring out, just trying new things, like what works, what doesn't work, what's going on, and really just exploring and experimenting and figuring stuff out. And the book was something that I was like, the guy put it as simple as like, don't say stupid stuff out loud. I'm thinking the amount of times I've told myself, I'm not good at golf. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm like, I'm giving myself no chance. And then I start believing that. Just, you can consciously change that and just don't say dumb things, and then change that to like, I can do this. And you can control saying that. And just by saying like, I can do this compared to like, I can't do this, you feel completely differently. And that can affect your performance so much.
Yeah, I read about that too with positive self-talk. And the thing that I learned also that you touch on here is, what's the dominant word when you're talking? When you're down on yourself or you're nervous or you're fearing that failure, and that's a big thing in baseball, it's a big thing in golf, because if you're living and dying by every shot, by every base hit, you're going to be miserable because these are games of failure. You know what I mean? So the big thing here is accepting that, failure happens, but don't. Before the shot, you can control what you can control. Before you get up to hit, you can control what you can control. You don't want to go up there thinking like, oh God, I hope I don't strike out. I'm at 2 strikes, don't strike out, or just negative self-talk about your drive. If the dominant word, let's say you're up at the bat, up hitting, or you're up taking a shot in golf. I don't know if I said that right. I'm not a golfer. I'm sorry. But but let's say you're doing either of those two things and you go up there and you're like, okay, don't do this. Well, the dominant word is don't. So you're going to mess up. It's the dominant word is you're saying don't miss the shot. Don't swing and miss. The dominant word is swing and miss. It's not don't. But if
Mhm.
you're going to go up there and you're going to say like, okay, see ball, hit ball, or I'm a good driver. I'm sorry. Again, I'm a good driver. The dominant word now is hit ball or drive it. It's not mess up or miss or I'm bad. You know what I mean? And that really affects your game in these types of sports where mentally you have to be there just as much physically.
I think the good example of that is one thing I struggle with so much is I would always get over a golf ball, and just in the back of my mind, it would be like, don't hit it left. It would either go exactly where I don't want it to go, or it would go so far right because I didn't want to hit it left, and it just gave you no chance to actually be successful.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
it's like such an easy thing to say, obviously not as such easy thing to do, but I think the important thing is like noticing that these are stuff that you can get better at without affecting your physical game. So like you don't have to be a better golfer or a better baseball player physically to get better at the game. And that's something that kind of resonated with me is like doing everything that you can control better and then just letting the rest handle itself. And automatically you're going to be better from that, like you talked about. But my next question for you, kind of that you touched on, is about education. And you talked about a little bit about being blindsided when you were experiencing some of those emotions and not really working with sports psychologists before you got to Maryland. Do you think if some of that stuff was pushed in high school or in younger ages of sports, we would see kind of a change in society or the stigma around mental health?
100%. I also think it's starting to happen. Like I knew nothing about depression or anxiety or mental health or even the sports performance side of sports in high school. I wish I knew it because it would have been such a benefit to me. But I think just reaching people at a younger age and giving examples of like professional athletes who have dealt with it, which is starting to happen more and more, just giving the message it's okay not to be okay. Like you don't have to be perfect, amazing every single second of the day. This is a natural thing for humans to occur. And just more education and like it's just going to let people realize that what's going on in their life, and then they're going to be more willing to get help and get it fixed and get it taken care of.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point. It's already starting to come out in so many different ways. So many athletes are coming out, whether it's, an amateur athlete or whether it's, NBA athletes like Kevin Love or DeMar DeRozan. It's out there. The resources are coming. Like, yes, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And, people are finally starting to like feel out how they're feeling and really, getting inside their brain and picking at then realizing, okay, like what's going on? Why is this happening? And then making that change, which is so powerful because 10 years ago, you didn't really hear about any of this. And it's all coming out so suddenly. And it's really, really a powerful movement, which, leads me to my next question, which is, we talk about your involvement. I know that you have had involvement with SAC. Do you want to talk about how you started to get involved and then, what led you to that path?
Yeah, so I was involved in SAC a little bit my freshman year, but not a lot. And I started a new position on the executive board. It was a mental health and wellness chair. So I was like, I've experienced mental health. I think this is a great opportunity to try to make a difference. So I just applied for it and got the position. And I just really wanted to be able to just make a difference for one person at Maryland next year and just try to let my experience be passed on to make a difference. So we did that, and then we started having a lot of events. So we did 3 total events, signature events that focused on mental health. We had Victoria Garrett come in November. We had 5 sports psychologists come in the first week of school in January, kind of do an education piece for all the coaches and then also present to all the players. And then we also had an event we called Let's Talk About It, where we had a bunch of student athletes actually share their mental health story to the student athlete committee or student athlete body.
What was the response to all of this going on?
It was amazing. There was a lot of coaches that were really, really receptive to it. I had some coaches that I didn't even expect would be like, I learned a lot about this. I didn't know like a lot of people felt this way and had these experiences. So it's something we can definitely focus on more. A lot of people I know their team started talking about mental health more. I know the field hockey team started focusing on it a lot more. The women's golf team it started a conversation at our school. And even just talking to some of my friends, there's one of my really good friends. He's one of the best athletes at Maryland. We're in the same class. He plays a different sport, but I'm not going to name his name because he's not here. I had no clue he was depressed his entire freshman year of school. And it was bad. And he was always a kid. He was a kid who would always have a smile on his face. And it's just something that it's so easy to hide. And it was just nice to see a lot of people starting to talk about mental health more and be a lot more open and vulnerable about it. And the response was absolutely amazing. And it started a great conversation on our campus.
Yeah, I think events like those are huge. That we had an event like that at Towson that kind of sparked me to share my story, which was so powerful. But I think that's awesome that they're doing education for coaches because I think we've had some people on the podcast in the past that have talked about coaches getting educated on mental health and how that can make a huge difference. It's one thing to hear a doctor say it or hear administration come down and say it, but it's another thing to have your coaches really involved in it and care about it and want it for your players. And I think that's awesome that you guys push that, and that's awesome that all those programs you guys are doing.
Because I think one of the most powerful things we did this year is we had 3 people. Nikki was one of them. Share their story in front of every single student athlete, all administration, and all the head coaches. And just for the coaches to hear what goes on in a student athlete's life and see that, like, sometimes they can almost forget that we are people. We're not just players. And just to see that human side and see what we go through on a day-to-day basis. Because being a student athlete is hard. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, definitely. Nikki was awesome on this podcast. We're going to get her on for another episode to get more into detail about her own story. But how was that hearing all those stories that were up there? It's got to be hard as the student body to hear all that because it's obviously tough. These are deep conversations to be having, but it's also like you also have to be cognizant. It is tough for people to open up. Like I know personally, like if I went up there and told my story in front of an audience of all the student athletes, I would be shaking. Like it's just the natural outcome of that. How was the response from the people telling their story and the people, hearing it?
I know leading up, a lot of people telling the story were very nervous and scared because it's something that's really, really hard to do. But at the end, they kind of felt like felt good to kind of get it out there and be like, this is what I've gone through in my life. This is what's happened. I'm not always this smiley, happy-go-lucky person. Like life is hard and like, here's my mess. And I think that's something that's really, really powerful to do. And then the people hearing the story were so supportive and so accepting of it. And I think it also got people to start sharing more of their experiences and what goes on. And I think the one thing that was really important is like if we went and started asking people like, how are you doing? You'd start to get more truthful responses like, you know what, I didn't have a great day today. I think just hearing it from other people who are in the exact same shoes that like I've dealt with things can make you feel really a lot more comfortable saying like I also have had similar experience. Like let's talk about it. And I think
Yeah, I think those events are so important because you often hear like you're not alone, and that's a common saying in the mental health field and in society in general. But when you're going through something, you don't necessarily always feel that. You hear people say you're not alone and I'm here for you, but it doesn't feel like that. And when you go to an event like that and hear student athletes that are in the same position as you be vulnerable and share their story, it kind of hits you like, man, like these people are really going through the same thing as me, and I really am not alone. So those things are so important to share, especially when you talk about student athletes and what that experience is like.
I agree 100%. Like my freshman year, it felt like it was just me going against the world every single day. It's like, what's going on? Because it's such a difficult experience, and it's just nice to see people experience the same things you're going through, and they can go through it with you. It's a lot better to go through it with other people than just by yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I have another question following up on that about sharing, coming out with your stories. Why do you think it's so hard for male athletes in specific to share their story? We talk about masculinity and stuff like that, but why do you think that's so hard?
I think it's kind of the culture you grow up in. Males aren't necessarily encouraged to show emotion. You want to be the tough guy growing up, like playing a bunch of sports. Like you didn't want to be the guy crying on the sideline or just showing emotion was a weakness. And that was kind of how I was raised. And that's kind of just how a lot of males are looked at. So it's really hard to be vulnerable and show emotion and show what's going on in your life as a male athlete. I think just the culture of where we've been in the past makes it really, really tough to do. But I also just seeing people like Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, like speak up about it makes it so much easier for people to do. Because if you see a professional athlete at that level able to be vulnerable and emotional about something, like you can do it too. And it's something that I like. It's freeing being emotional and actually like showing what's inside you because it's so easy just to hold it inside and let it kind of just like boil up inside you until it gets to the point where like you have to let it all out. So it's a very, very healthy thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. When I was coming out with my story, it almost felt like a weight off my shoulders. There was a piano on my back for so long. And, I feel like whenever I meet somebody or I get really close with somebody, if I don't tell them my story or what happened or what part of like it's part of me at this point, you know. It doesn't define me, but it is an experience that I've had, my own OCD and everything that I deal with. And I feel like if I don't tell them, it's like I'm hiding something from them because you know you shouldn't be ashamed to tell somebody your story and it's part of you and it feels really good when you tell people. And another thing that you know that's big with what you were talking about is you said that you looked up on the internet and everything you found it on the internet, and a lot of people that have depression, like it seems like you didn't really know what depression was, you know, until you went on the internet and found it. And that's a big thing. A lot of people are misdiagnosed or undiagnosed because they don't know that they have it. And that's a thing in college, 18 to 24 years old. It's very common. And especially as a man, you know, you don't want to talk about it. And that's part of a culture thing that needs to change.
Yeah, I had no clue, and I've always been the person who's just gonna constantly like just work hard, keep going on the run. I was a kid who had a 4.0 freshman year, was doing a lot of stuff at Maryland. Everything looked perfectly fine, and I just kind of let everything boil inside me and just get to the point where like I couldn't take it anymore because I had no clue what was actually going on because I didn't know what depression really was, didn't know what anxiety really was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge thing, like you said, being able to notice it. Obviously, when I was had a similar experience at Towson my freshman year, but you almost feel like, or personally, I almost felt like selfish. It was like, who am I to come out and talk about struggling when I'm, playing Division 1 sport and I'm living, I'm healthy and all this stuff, and I'm living relatively a good life. I felt kind of selfish to come out and say that I was struggling, but like you said, it's okay to not be okay, and being able to accept, we had someone on a few weeks ago that said the biggest thing is to be able to drop your ego. And yeah, we're athletes, and yeah, we get put up on a pedestal a lot, and we're seen as sometimes greater than other people. But the reality is, like, you're just like everyone else. And in the end of the day, if you can set your ego aside and see yourself as just a regular person who needs to get help, that's the most important thing.
Yep. I'm even thinking like I played golf at a Big Ten school. It's been my dream to play a sport at Maryland since I was a little kid. And now I'm a freshman. I'm actually doing that, and I'm not happy. Like, what's going on? Like, this shouldn't be happening because I just didn't know.
Yeah, so I actually just had a talk with my therapist about these different things and setting goals as like, oh, once I get this job, once I get to Maryland, or once I, you know, land, get this house, get this thing, then I'll be happy. And you're constantly striving for those things that make you happy, but you're really not sitting back and looking at the process. And what you talk about, which is key, is your goals when you're out there now, which I think has helped you moving forward. I don't want to speak for you, but I think that when you make goals about the process, like, okay, what are your goals for the day? Well, instead of saying like, okay, my goal is, you know, to get the big house, to get a good job, to play this sport, to play Division 1, to play in the minor leagues, to play professional golf, it could be, okay, well, my goal today is, you know, to drive the ball well, hit it, drive it well, think positive, and do that, and trusting the process and talking about the process rather than the outcome. Because once you hit that outcome, everything wears off. You eventually habituate to that feeling. You're on that high for only a short amount of time. And just feeling like, okay, now I'm off that high. Now I need to find the next step. So when you're at Maryland, you're like, okay, I'm at my dream school, but why am I not playing as much as I want? Or why am I not playing well? And so you're constantly looking for that next thing rather than enjoying the process and enjoying the moment.
No, I'd agree with that 100%. It's actually the book I'm reading right now is literally called Burn Your Goals. And it's about getting rid of kind of goal setting in your life and just focusing on the process. And it's more focusing on the process of becoming the best person you can possibly become. And it's almost repurposing your sport to use it in a way to become a better person and not being as results oriented all the time where it's life or death, every single outcome. And that's been huge for me because it's taking more focusing on what can I learn today from golf and how can I implement it into my life, which is way more powerful than I'm going to be a happy person if I play well, or I'm going to be mad if I don't play well. And that's just not a fun way to live with golf, just controlling your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think process is a huge thing, but on top of that, for me, I'm sure you guys talk about this at Maryland as we do at Towson, but being able to detach from results and being able to step back and say, did I go through the process I wanted to, and did I do exactly how I wanted? Did I control everything I could control? And then at the end of the day, if you did that, the result doesn't matter because that's out of your control. So going through the process and being able to accept that if you do the process the way you want, the results are out of your control and you can't do anything about that.
Yeah, especially in golf, you lose the vast majority of the time, no matter how well you play.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so I was going to branch off on that a little bit and talk about an example that I read from a book. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. I'm
Yep.
not going to say it, but you've read it? Okay, so he talks about, you set a goal. There's some guy who's a really high achiever. He's like, okay, well, when I'm older, I want to have a mansion in a Corvette or a Lamborghini or something like that, a big, nice sports car. The guy doesn't hit that goal, but he has a great family. He's living really high and really well. He just didn't hit that goal he wanted. And then you have another guy who's like, okay, well, I'm just going to make the most of every day and I'm happy with where I am. And it's just goes to show you that guy's going to be happier because he didn't set that, like, as much as it's great to have goals, like falling short, you're never going to be fulfilled. And once you hit that, you're not going to be fulfilled because you're going to find another goal to hit. So a big thing is kind of like you said, that process, just letting it come as it goes every day, setting a new goal for that day. And then that makes it easier to move on to the next day. Because if you go by like a whole lifetime goal and you don't hit that, you're going to just be shattered. But if you go day by day, you're like, okay, well, I can improve tomorrow. There's always a next day. There's always a next day where I can set another goal where it keeps you grounded and committed to the process rather than the whole overall outcome.
I think going on that, the best way I found to kind of have goal setting be really, really productive for me is I learned this from a book called What Drives Winning, and I'll take a note card and I'll write a character skill on it. So it could be like hardworking for this week. How am I going to be a hardworking person this week? I'm going to stay after practice for 25 minutes. So like that's my goal for the week because I can control that. Instead of being like, I have to win this golf tournament. I have no control if I do that or not. And that's just made things so much more easier because I have control over what I'm doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that another thing is high achieving athletes. Being a college athlete is very demanding, no matter what level you are at, and you're at the big stage in the Big Ten. And a big thing for athletes is we're all high achievers where we want the best for ourselves at all times. So no wonder that there's so many athletes that are feeling like, there's depression, there's anxiety coming along with this. But if you could just realize, the big thing for me that I've tried to learn is like, you are enough with what you are doing. You are enough. At the end of the day, what you're doing is enough. And you have to respect yourself and treat yourself the right way in order to get those results. You can't be so hard on yourself where it eventually hurts your results because of it. You just got to remind yourself, you are enough. You're human. You're making mistakes. Like, you're going through life. This is what happens. Enjoy it as it comes.
It's huge. And I think at the end of the day, if you get rid of your sport, there's so many great people out there who aren't necessarily the best college athlete. And we need to celebrate them more for just being great people and not giving people value just based on like what do they do in their sport. And I think that's also huge.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the podcast, self-identity with sport and kind of, like we said, sport ends for everybody at some point, and being able to realize that it's really the process of going through college athletics that shapes you into the person you are, not so much the actual games and stuff. It's the experiences you have and the time with your teammates and, going through programs like you guys do at Maryland and being on the SAC executive board. It's stuff like that that's going to, the stuff that 20 years from now you're going to remember. You're not going to remember what you shot in a tournament, and you're not going to remember striking out in that bat. You're going to remember the experience of being a college athlete, and that's something kind of I try to put in perspective a lot. That when I have a bad round in golf, it's like when I look back when I'm 40 years old, I'm not going to remember that round. I'm going to remember being on the bus with the guys and traveling to events and stuff like that.
That's so good. It's 100% how it should be. I think. Like, what's the first thing you get asked after you play a round of golf? It goes immediately to, what did you shoot?
Yep.
It's straight to results-based oriented. Like, for baseball, like, how many hits did you have? Straight to results-based oriented. Like, that's just how society works. And then, if you shot a good throw, everyone's going to be happy around you. If you played bad, it's going to be like, he played bad. Like, I can't bother him now. And that's, like, just the society. It's so results-based driven. And I think that's what makes it really, really hard to do a lot of these things, is that there's almost a conflict. Like, I want to be really, really process-based oriented, but society's telling me to be results-driven. So that's where it gets really, really, really difficult to actually do.
Yeah, it's almost like if you came in after failing and said, I did what I could and I controlled what I can control and I went through my process, but I didn't succeed. That's almost like looked down upon, like, well, you didn't do enough then, or you failed. When in reality, like, you controlled what you could control, and you're just separating the results in the process.
because that's all you can really do.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. We always, it is a results-based society we're living in. And actually, if you look at it and you are process-oriented, you will find yourself performing better than you would have if you were results. Because when you're results-oriented, you're constantly thinking, black and white thinking. I either get a hit or I don't. I either drive the ball well or I don't, So to say that that's black and white thinking, so you're living and dying by that, rather than saying like, okay, I'm going to try to hit the ball hard up the middle, or I'm going to control what I can control at the stance. All right, if it's a bad pitch, if the umpire strikes me out, it's out of my control now. What's in my control? What can I do moving forward? And yeah, exactly. People always ask me like, oh, how'd you do? What'd you hit today? What were you today? And 2 for 4, 3 for 4, 1 for 3, 0 for 4. Does it at the end of the day? Did I make the plays I could have? Did I control what I could have controlled? Like I could have went 0 for 4 and hit 4 line drives to the middle right at the center fielder, and I could have went 4 for 4 with a bunt single, a dink single into left field, and then one maybe nice hit. But you're not thinking that way. This year I was consumed with that in the beginning, and it ended up being detrimental to the beginning of my year because instead of thinking like, oh, I hit the ball hard, I'm feeling it, I was thinking, oh God, now I'm 1 for 9, now I'm 1 for 8, 1 for 10. Instead of thinking I hit the ball hard, it's gonna fall. But then when I had the game where I was like 4 for 4, I had like 3 bloop singles, and I felt really good. But why did I feel good? I didn't play any better that game. It just fell. So you just got to be process oriented and control what you can control.
So I got one final question for you, Will. One thing we like to do here is give advice to people who are listening. So what advice would you give to an athlete out there, maybe in college, going through a similar experience that you had, or someone going through a mental health journey? What advice would you give to them to share their experiences or get through the tough times?
I think 2 things. First, you're not alone, and like reach out to help. Like don't be afraid to actually reach out and try to get help from people and let them know what's going on in your life. And I think the next thing is I've been given this advice from some very, very smart people in Maryland. Everything that you go through right now is going to shape you into the person 10, 15, 20 years from today. And it's going to make you a better person. You're going to look back at your time in college and be like, those experiences, like they might have sucked during it, but they've made me such a stronger and better person in the long run. And that's kind of a lot of the point of college is you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to grow a lot more and you're just going to become a lot better person because of it.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, Will. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really enjoyed this. Personally, I got a lot out of this conversation, and I'm excited for everybody to hear it.
Yep, thank you so much, guys.
And that was Will Koras.
Yeah, Will was awesome. Obviously, him being a golfer really resonated with me, and a lot of the stuff he talked about was really important. But specifically, I really liked how he talked about being goal-oriented and going through the process and not focusing too much on the results. I think that's advice that people can take for any sport and even in life in general. So I'm really proud of him for all the work he's doing at Maryland, and that was awesome.
Yeah, Will talking about the process rather than the result is big in sports. I have a tough time with it myself, but you got to keep reminding yourself that you are enough, and that was a main point. I'm really proud of him for speaking up and finding the resources he needed to get better and using it to, move the platform forward. I think it's great. Moving forward, we'll have hopefully a new guest next week. Right now, just, stay tuned and we'll talk soon.